There's a brand new card coming out to Clash Royale on July 30th called the Suspicious Bush. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the stats of the bush and the stats of the goblins that come out of the bush, show you guys gameplay of it, and then we'll get into what the community thinks of the new card, whether people think it is balanced or if it's broken and needs a nerf. So it's a 2 elixir rare card. The bush has 81 hit points, which means it will die to any spell in the game. It targets buildings, so that is all buildings in the game, not just the tower troops. And then once it breaks, it spawns 2 bush goblins. Now, the bush goblins are actually stronger than regular goblins. They have 304 hit points, so it's the same amount of hit points as an archer, actually, which means they don't die to a log. And they deal 227 damage, which is more damage than the regular goblins deal, too. Alright, here we go, guys. Let's get into a couple matches now with the Suspicious Bush. So in the first game, we're going to be running it inside of a cycle deck with the Tesla against someone else running the bush as well. And what you guys are going to see is buildings are going to be a fairly good counter to the bush, because then the bush, of course, ends up going to the building instead of your tower. So one thing you could compare the Suspicious Bush to, it's kind of a weird comparison because of course they're both very different, but it's probably the only thing you could compare it to, because the bush is a fairly unique card, is you can kind of think of it as the wall breakers, because the wall breakers are also 2 elixir, and just like the wall breakers, I think of the bush as being a card that's probably going to be fairly good inside of cycle decks. And really, the wall breakers, as you guys know, buildings are one of the only ways you're going to be able to effectively stop them. One thing, though, that kind of separates the bush from the wall breakers and makes the bush potentially even more annoying to deal with is the fact that once you use your log on top of the bush, you still have to deal with the goblins. They will actually end up reaching your tower and getting a tiny bit of chip damage. And as I mentioned, the goblins deal more damage out of the bush than the regular goblins. So oftentimes you might have to overcommit, or if you're in an awkward cycle, it could be really, really obnoxious to deal with. So here we go. Evolved wall breakers are ready to go. And I could see the bush actually pairing well with the wall breakers because, like I said, they force out similar responses. So if you have to go in for your spells on top of wall breakers or a building, then the bush can end up being a pretty big threat. And as you can see, oh my goodness, 4 bushes coming in. So you guys are going to see the Tesla, what I'm talking about, or really any building. When you have a building down, it really is the best counter. As you can see, all 4 of the bushes get dealt with really, really easily when they're pulled to the middle by a building and you don't have to worry about them reaching your towers. So for sure, the best counter in the game to them is probably going to be things like the Tesla or the cannon or even the bomb tower, because the bomb tower as well giving you that splash against them. So that's going to be fairly good for the Evolved Tesla. Of course, the Evolved Tesla already very good, might even be slightly better if it ends up being the best counter in the game to the bush. And as you can see, the bush ends up taking the tower there. It just, I mean, I will say first impression, it definitely seems very, very strong. I don't know if, you know how people always over exaggerate and say that it's just absurdly broken. I really don't want to go that far because sometimes I end up being wrong when I say like it's ridiculously broken, but I can say without a doubt there's no way that this card is bad. It is for sure at the bare minimum above average. I mean, think about it. It's only 2 elixir. It's a very low risk card to use, and now you guys are going to see it inside of a P.E.K.K.A. Bridgespam deck. P.E.K.K.A. Bridgespam could be kind of an interesting combination because it's a heavier deck compared to minor wall breakers, but I think it could fit well in some heavier decks. I don't really think the bush is going to go well inside of a Golem deck, for example, or Electro Giant, but I could see it working inside of a Bridgespam deck like P.E.K.K.A. I don't even know what the heck I would even consider the bush. As you can see, we're going to go in for the bush here in front of the wizard. And it's almost sort of like a tank for it in a way, because it's like you have to get rid of the bush, and then it's like the goblins that come out are tanking for the support card, as you saw there with the wizard. So it seems like there's a lot of uses to the card, and I think that's going to make it be very, very strong. Typically, cards you see in the game that have a lot of uses, or they're just very versatile and fit in a lot of decks, tend to be extremely broken oftentimes. So even if the card's strength isn't ridiculously broken, if you can fit it in a lot of decks, make it work in a lot of situations, that's where you see cards be really OP sometimes. I mean, a perfect example of that is spells. I mean, that's why spells like Log and Arrows, no matter what the meta is, they're always very broken. And it could be a similar situation to the Bush. So Bush getting played in and, oh my gosh, forces a Fireball out. This is what I mean. If you get in awkward rotations, you have to do things like that, because the problem is a unit isn't able to deal with it. You can, now I will say, there are some exceptions. You actually can play a Mega Knight on top of the Bush, for example, and it will take care of the Bush and the Goblins. But I mean, that's a 7-for-2 trade. So it's like, even though, yeah, there are some units that can do it, that's a massive negative elixir trade. So P.E.K.K.A here going to be on top of the Royal Giant, and there we go. Evo Zap on top of the Fisherman going to be very solid to ensure that P.E.K.K.A is going to be able to deal with the Royal Giant. And the Evolved Wizard is insanely broken. I'm honestly surprised. I really hope, we don't know the finalized balance changes. I really hope it gets added to the finalized balance changes, though, because at the moment, it is currently not going to be getting a nerf, which I definitely think is problematic. I will say there's some other evolutions that probably need one as well, like the Evolved Tesla could certainly use another one. But anyway, we're going to be focused back on the Bush. That's the main topic we're talking about. I just decided to yap about the Evos for a second because some of them are certainly really strong. So Bush here at the bridge, it just forces a response every single time. As you can see, Log is going to be okay against it, especially when you log well in advance, because then the Goblins will not make it to the tower, especially if the King Tower is activated. So RG is going to get a little bit of damage this time around because there wasn't enough elixir to go in for a P.E.K.K.A. And at this point, it's pretty much anyone's game. We're going to go in for a P.E.K.K.A here in front of the Evolved Wizard. It's going to be pretty good pressure and force a big response, and then Bush in the other lane, so a little bit of dual lane pressure. This is why I could see it fitting well inside of Bridgspam, because the Bush, as cheap as it is, and applies pressure at the same time, it's great for dual lane pressure. Ramrider is going to connect, and look at the right lane, how much damage the Bush Goblins are doing. This is exactly what I'm talking about and why it could be good for dual lane pressure. Missed Fireball, oh my gosh, yeah, it is game at this point, 100%. Bush coming in, and look at that, Fisherman gets forced out because the log came in late. So that's what has to happen if you end up spelling late, and that is going to be GG over there. All right, let's take a quick look and see what the community thinks of the new card. Dumb concept. Always requires a negative or neutral elixir trade to be defended and gets 1,000 damage for 2 elixir if not defended. So it kind of reminds me of the wall breakers when they were first released. Goblins inside should die to log. That's too much damage for 2 elixir. Meme card, not gonna lie, but looks interesting. That is definitely getting nerfed, bruh, and it's the Fortnite Bush. Well, this seems broken, especially against non-cycle decks. That's such a stupid card. This needs a nerf. People are just generally confused. Seems like a pointless card, to be honest. Well, overall, the reaction from the community seems to be negative. I don't know if this is saying much, though, because pretty much anytime a new card or evolution gets added, people are pretty critical of it, typically. But it's definitely an interesting card. I don't think we have a card like this in the game, so I guess we'll see how it plays out, but I definitely agree with what most people are saying and think it definitely should get a nerf before it gets introduced into the game. But let me know in the comments what you guys think, and if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you guys aren't subscribed already. You can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game. Thank you again, until next time, guys.